Thank you for tuning in to Love in Your Hands with Cynthia Clark, the podcast about how to live life with love, passion, and purpose. This podcast is sponsored by loveinyourhands.com, the place to find long-lasting love through the merging of ancient science, modern technology, and quantum physics. Tired of superficial connections? Go to loveinyourhands.com and start your free Align to Your Soulmate 5-day challenge where you could win a $20 Amazon gift card. Now here's your host, Cynthia Clark, certified palm reading consultant, love compatibility coach, author, and speaker. Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Cynthia Clark, and I'm always excited to talk about ideas that can inspire you to live the life you want, regardless of your story. So today we are going to be talking about success and leadership, and I can't wait to learn from our very distinguished expert. And I'd like to start out with a little palm reading lesson because, of course, your hands tell you all about who you are in all different aspects of your life. And believe it or not, leadership is one of those things that actually does show up in your hands. And actually, it shows up in several different ways. So first thing you want to check is what we call your Jupiter finger, which is your index finger, okay? So this is your finger of not only how you look at yourself, but it's your leadership finger. It's how you can think of it as how you become inspired. Okay, so when this finger is long and strong, that's showing natural leadership energy. And also you want to take a look at the mount of Jupiter, which is located just underneath the finger. And every once in a while, there will be a talent marker that shows up there. We call it the Jupiter star. And that's actually the mark of a leadership talent. Okay, so a star, by the way, in the hands looks like 3 lines that intersect and they cross like that, like a little asterisk. Okay, so they would be located, this particular star would be located in this little mount here underneath the index finger. So if you have a Jupiter star, you have a natural leadership ability. And if you have a long Jupiter finger, which by the way, you can tell if it's long relative to the ring finger. Okay, so if your index finger is longer than your ring finger, it is considered a strong finger. So that is today's palm reading lesson, and now I'm excited to introduce our very special guest. Yay, we have Cody Dakota Wooten, who is a leadership and heroic potential coach. Can't wait to learn all about that. Who focuses on faith, family, freedom, and future. Welcome so much to the show. Thanks, Cody, for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Cynthia. I'm excited for today's show. I'm ready to have a good time.
Yay. Okay, so tell us a little bit about your story. In other words, your background, and how did you get to be where you are today?
That could be answered in a large variety of ways, but if we just look at more the career side of how I got here today, I had gotten into corporate America. I was doing really good working corporate America, moving quick through the ladder. But as I was going through the work, I was really unhappy doing the work. And it's not that I was on a bad team. It's not that I had a bad boss or anything. I had a great team that I was a part of. I had an amazing manager who I was working under. Just lots of great stuff, but it was just not a satisfying career for me. Now, if only I could speak. So at this point, I was kind of like, I don't want to continue down this career path. I feel like it's the ladder leaning against the wrong building. Where do I need to go with my life? And I had no clue. And it was around this time where I got introduced to personal development. Going all through my entire education, never really heard of personal development. And which is really disappointing because my perception of personal development at that time was that it was for people who felt like they had no future, or felt like there was no hope for them, or, felt really stuck in their life. And I was like, that's not me. I'm not that guy. And I was so wrong. And I'm so happy that I discovered how wrong I really was. And once I discovered the power of personal development, I just dove head over heels for everything personal development, going left and right, left and right. And I landed upon this book, actually. It's called The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth by John C. Maxwell. It's phenomenal. John Maxwell has become a mentor of mine and has shaped my life in so many different ways. And when I read this book, I said, hey, I need to know more about this guy. I need to know more about what he does. And I chased everything that he did. And that's where I really landed under the idea of quote unquote leadership. And as I was understanding what is leadership, what does it look like in the world, when I looked out into the world, what I saw was generations of people coming up into the world looking for amazing leaders and not really finding it anywhere, who wanted to take the reins of the future and couldn't figure out how to take it. And I saw other generations who wanted to pass on the reins, but couldn't figure out how to give it to other generations. And on top of this, I saw so many leadership problems in the world. It didn't matter what facet you're talking about, whether it was in business. I mean, look at Enron. You looked at politics. I don't think I need to say anything more about that. You look at religions, right? So many troubling things happening in religions. And then at home, so many troubling things happening at home. I saw leadership failures in all of these places. And I saw this generations coming up into the world looking for leadership and not finding it. And so I've made it my career to change that in the world, to show people what is leadership supposed to be looking like and how do we actually get people there.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I think about how a lot of the role models that people look at these days are, oftentimes they're actors or they're sports people, and a lot of them have all kinds of problems. They've got like drug addictions, or I mean, they're not exactly great role models, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're being hailed as these great, amazing things. And in some aspects of their lives, it may be true, but in so many other aspects, it's very troubling to see how far people will go to emulate the people they think are successful.
Exactly. Yeah, it is kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a problem. So I'm happy that you're tackling this problem.
Thank you.
Somebody needs to tackle this problem for sure. And so tell us a little bit about, where do you see the holes, and where do you fill those holes?
Yeah, so there are a lot of holes. Let me start by saying that there are so many holes within the context of leadership. I actually just recently wrote an article for Forbes about this, which was it was a super tremendous honor to be able to have something published with Forbes. But one of the first places I like to look at is, what is leadership? Like, if I ask you, what is leadership, what would you say?
Well, to me, leadership is about inspiring others to action. And, that's how I look at it. It's somebody who's inspirational and can rally the troops, so to speak, and elevate the entire group.
Exactly. And that's a great definition of leadership. Another one from John Maxwell, he always says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. Another one that I've heard is leaders solve problems, or
Right.
leaders teach people how to think, right? These are all good definitions, but at the end of the day, is that really what we want out of a leader? Do we just want those things? Because I can name a pretty good handful of people who were in leadership positions who did those things, who also did atrocious things in the world.
Right. That's true.
And is that all it is?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer I run into is no, that's not all it is. It's a good starting point, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not all it really is. And so the problem isn't that leadership is quote unquote hard to understand, but it's that what we're actually looking for isn't just leadership. We're looking for specific types of leaders.
Right. Makes sense.
Right? And so what I've been calling that is legendary leadership. That's what we're looking for in the world. We
Mm.
want people who, when we look at them, they're worth talking about positively, whose lives we want to be able to take and pass on to future people as well as we can, because
Mm.
that's what it is to be legendary.
Right.
If you,
When you say legendary, immediately what comes to mind for me is like Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, those types of leaders.
exactly. Exactly, right? They're people we write about, we talk about positively, that we want to pass on their story as well as we can, because that's what it is to be legendary. The word legendary comes from the Latin roots, which is something worth writing and talking about to the masses.
Mm.
During the medieval ages, when writing wasn't a very common thing, being able to read wasn't a common thing. And so the only way for that knowledge to get passed on well over time was for certain people to keep records of it and to pass it on orally.
Right. Makes sense. So,
Right? On top of this, one of the things that I like to say is that legendary leaders help people unlock their heroic potential.
hmm.
Now, what is heroic potential? If you look at the word hero, it comes from the Greek word heros, which means somebody with the strength for two or more people.
Hmm. Interesting definition. I wouldn't necessarily put it that way, but that's interesting.
It's very interesting because most people, when you think of hero, it's someone who slays the dragon or someone who does this incredible feat that's out of people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
But to be a hero doesn't have to be that extreme. It can be that extreme, definitely. But really, all it is to be heroic is for you to have strength not only for yourself, but for at least one other person around you.
Hmm. Well, that makes it a lot easier.
A lot easier.
Especially when you think of it that way. It's like, and I often do think like that. It's like, well, if my work helps at least one person, I'm doing pretty well. And hopefully at least one person is listening to the show today who's going to be inspired. And that's the goal.
Exactly. Absolutely. I had a conference not too long ago, and I had this wonderful speaker. Her name's Dee Collins. Dee told me how her mother inspired her to do everything that she's doing today. And as she's telling me the story of her mother and how her mother impacted her, all I could think of, and I told her this during our conversation, was that, you know, different people have different individuals that they look at who are they consider legendary. And for Dee, her mother was that legendary leader.
Hmm.
If her mother hadn't been a legendary leader to her, she wouldn't be where she is today, inspiring thousands of people.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really amazing. Puts it all into perspective too, because a lot of times people feel like they're very insignificant or they really, what they're doing doesn't really matter. And
Absolutely.
it's like, you know what? It really does matter.
Yeah.
and little things add up to big things. I liken it to, you throw the pebble in the pond and yeah, the little circles, they start out very small, but then they get bigger and bigger and bigger as they go out. And it's like, you just don't know what kind of impact you're going to actually make, but it's important to just put in the day-to-day effort, and the little things can add up to the big things.
Absolutely. And that is so important. The small things really do lead up to the big things, even if we don't see it happen. One of my favorite stories, and I don't even remember where I heard this. It was probably like Oprah, I think, when I was much younger, and my mom used to watch like the Oprah show when she got home from work, and there was the story of somebody who had created a huge impact, who was telling the audience how they were about to commit suicide, like that day, not the day of the recording, but there was a day where they were about to commit suicide, and the one thing that prevented them from committing suicide was somebody who looked at them and smiled at them that day. It
Mm,
was that one act that led to them staying alive so that they could go on in the future to change the world.
mm. Wow. Who would think such a little thing would make such a big difference?
Exactly.
Mm,
Exactly. And the person who smiled that day probably had no clue that that smile literally saved that person's life.
mm.
Literally saved that person's life.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, that's a very powerful story. So thanks for sharing.
Well, I'm happy that it was shared with me, because
Yeah.
that has been something that's stuck with me
Hmm.
since then.
I love that.
Because yeah, and you don't know the challenges people are going through. There are we were just talking about how successful some people are in certain areas
Hmm.
and how terrible other parts of their life are. And there are so many people that are going through that right now.
Oh, constantly. I mean, there are very few people that have every single part of their life 100%. I mean, that's extremely rare.
I would argue none of us do, right?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
even the people we look up to, who, even if they are legendary, they don't have everything put together. It doesn't happen. I
No,
mean, like,
yeah, no.
you mentioned Mother Teresa earlier, right?
Yes.
Mother Teresa is hailed as one of the paragons of faith.
Hmm.
And in her diaries, which she never intended for anyone to read, she talked about how often she doubted her faith,
Mm.
constantly, while she's going out and changing people's lives, while she's literally changing the world, while people are putting her up on a pedestal, saying the amazing things she's doing, she was having doubts.
Mm. Yeah, we all do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's human.
Yes. And it's okay. So that's awesome. So what are some things that we can do to build our leadership muscles? What can we do?
Well, if you want to go back to the very beginning of this, right? We talked about heroic potential.
Hmm.
In order for you to have the strength for two or more people, you have to have strength enough for yourself.
Yes, for sure.
So often, people get so caught up in being strong for everybody else when they're not strong enough for themselves. And within this, you cannot give what you do not have,
Mm.
right? If I don't have $1 million, I cannot give you $1 million. It's just not possible.
Right.
If I do not have energy, I cannot give you my full self. I cannot give you my full work potential. It's not
Mm.
possible.
Right.
If we don't have that strength in ourselves, we cannot be leaders to the fullest extent of what is possible. We can't reach that heroic potential. And
Hmm.
we have first understood ourselves to a level that allows our strength to get to more than just us.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. It's like the you think of the caretakers who just get burned out and they don't, yeah, if they don't take care of themselves,
Yeah,
they're pretty soon they're the ones who get sick, and a lot of
yeah,
times they can even die before the person that they're taking care of. So
exactly. And that happens A lot. There's
Mhm.
actually a whole industry that's rising up just to help people who are caretakers
Mhm.
because of how frequently they're burnt out, because of how much they're putting into it that they don't actually have available to themselves.
Mm, exactly. So I wanted to comment too, just a little aside. I noticed you had rings on your Jupiter fingers. I don't know.
I got lots of rings.
Yeah, I don't know if I have to just comment on that because a lot of times, and I do as well, by the way. So
Here, I actually have 2 rings on this finger,
yeah,
on this Jupiter finger.
we're both wearing our Jupiter rings. So what that means is that you're actually activating your Jupiter energy, regardless of whether or not that's your strong finger. So I think that's really amazing. So it's funny how you're like embodying this leadership energy, and you are activating that with your rings. It's so cool.
Well, thank you. I haven't ever heard that, and that's just really fascinating. I'm I'll be the first one to say I'm a bit of an oddball, and I completely accept that. That's another key thing in leadership that we often mistaken is
Mm,
that we have to be a certain person to be a leader.
mm.
No, you don't have to be a certain person. You have to be more yourself than you've ever been.
You have to be authentically you.
Exactly. Like you have to be you plus you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it is. So often, and our society shapes us like this, especially in the United States. We look at what our weaknesses are and we try and make our weaknesses better.
Hmm.
And there's
Exactly.
only so much you can put into your weaknesses that will have any impact on your life in general.
Yes, I
And
find
this
it to
comes,
be a total waste of time, to be honest. It is such a waste of time and it's exhausting. You
it
know,
is exhausting.
it's like
Absolutely.
when I first started, when I was young, I thought about going into computer science as a major because my brothers, I have two older brothers who I adore, both of them. But I thought, I want to be just like my two older brothers. So I'm going to go into computer science. And
Mhm.
yet my brain is not wired this way. And computer programming is definitely not something I enjoy. It's not something I'm good at. It's just, it's not me. So, but it's so funny how a lot of us think like that. And it's like, oh, I got to go into, this or that major because my parents expect that of me. Or, yeah, I want to be like my brother who I admire. And it's like, you know what? And that can just waste years of your time, right?
So many years. And that time is the most valuable asset we have. It
Yeah,
is every second you waste is more expensive than any dollar you can earn.
absolutely. Yeah, so we need to really hone in on our gifts and our talent, our natural talents, and we need to enhance those.
Absolutely. Actually, I've got a kind of funny story about this. So, like, you see me now, I'm like vibrant. I'm like, woo, like, let's talk, let's get this going, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There was a point in my life I thought I was an introvert.
Mm,
I like, I completely was convinced I was an introvert. And what I
interesting.
discovered, I have the book here that helped me figure out who I actually am. It's called Wired That Way.
Mm,
Fascinating book. It's a personality book. Now, I will put a little asterisk
mm-hmm.
that I think personality tests, programs, all of those are good to the effect that it can help you understand things about yourself better,
Mm-hmm.
but I do not think that they are designed to tell you how to live your life.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So
They are,
I always like to, yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
they're a tool. They're a tool to help you, but they're just a tool. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And so often people are like, "Oh, I'm this because I'm that personality." No, 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 no. Your
Yeah.
personality is that because of who you are,
Right.
not because the personality defines you, but
Mhm.
you more or less fit into this subcategory of the
Right.
personality.
Yeah. And I talk about this all the time because your hands reflect who you are, but your hands also change, and they change based upon your decisions and who you decide you want to be. So yeah, you can't, don't you shouldn't use it as an excuse. You know, it's not designed that way. It's designed to empower you to actually live your life better and more fulfilled. And
Exactly.
that's how I read hands, and how I try to educate people about hands as well. So yeah, you
Exactly.
don't use that marker as like, oh, I have this marker, therefore I can't do this or that. It's like, no, 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 it's not like that.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, so
So the way this played out for me, when I was really young, I was considered borderline ADD ADHD, which
mm,
means I was basically ADD ADHD, but not so bad that people felt I needed to be medicated, which I feels like a blessing in disguise. That's just my personal opinion.
yeah, for sure.
But when I went into the classroom, what happens in class? You're told you need to sit down, you need to focus, you need to do work. Another part of my personality is I like people to like me, and
Mm-hmm.
I like to keep the peace. That's a part of my personality.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went to school, in order to have the teachers like me and to keep the peace, I had to be more studious. And when I came home, my mom is a very like straightforward, direct, like let's get this done. You can do better. You got this kind of person, which has been tremendously helpful in many ways. Um, but there's also been some hiccups with that too, because when I would come home, she'd be like, "You can get that grade. You can pull it up. You can do better at this subject."
Mm-hmm.
And so even when I was struggling really hard in certain subjects, I wanted to make her happy and I wanted things to be peaceful at home. And so I forced myself to be more studious,
Mm.
forced
Interesting.
myself to sit still,
Mm-hmm.
forced myself to become more introverted in order to keep the peace and have people like me.
Hmm.
Now,
Interesting.
exactly. What
Mm.
happens with the personalities, the way the book describes it, is that on opposite ends of the spectrum, you can't be both sides of the spectrum because they're complete opposites of each other. But what
Right.
will happen sometimes is that you'll only have positive aspects of one of the areas and no negative aspects, which doesn't happen naturally
Hmm. Interesting.
because the positive always comes with the negatives. So
Mm-hmm.
if you have something that's only the positives, essentially what you've done is you've trained yourself to have those abilities.
Hmm.
And so I had only positive aspects in the more introverted side, and I had only negative aspects in the extroverted side
Hmm.
because I'd never really developed my extroverted tendencies. I shut them off and forced myself to become more introverted.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
this had some really interesting side effects. As I
Mm-hmm.
was going through life, because I thought I was introverted, I thought that I got energy by being alone, but I don't get energy being alone. So there was a lot of times where I felt very lonely. I felt like there wasn't much hope. I felt like I was always drained of energy. Um, on top of this, I didn't make a ton of friends. I wanted to make more friends, but because I told myself I was introverted, I had a really difficult time. And this is all mentally difficult time, not actually physically difficult, making those types of friends that I wanted to be making deep down.
Hmm.
When I discovered I was more extroverted and I was all like, this is strange. So I started to test it. And no, I got so much more energy being around people than I'd ever gotten trying to be alone. I made friends so much more quickly than I thought was possible. And I'm speaking and teaching and being on podcast interviews, which is like, if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would ever do that, I would have been like, yeah, right. I can't do any sort of speaking. Like, that's not me at all. But I love it. I
Uh-huh.
love being on stage. I love performing. I love having conversations with people. I love this environment right now that we're in currently
Yeah, me too.
because it's more aligned with who I actually am.
Isn't that great? That's awesome. Yeah, this is a very interesting conversation. So people, you recommend that they get to know themselves
Yes.
and get to know how they can grow. And it sounds like you help people with that. So let's talk a little bit about your work and what are some of the programs that you offer?
Absolutely. So I do it, probably the best way to go about helping like an individual one-on-one is going to be through coaching. Speaking, teaching is fantastic. However, there's only so much you can give to people on a stage
Right.
that they'll be able to actually run with or
Sure.
during a podcast interview, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
I could talk about personality all day long, but my personality is very different from your personality, which is very different from the thousands of people listening to the podcast right now. It's all of us have different personalities. We have different ways we play out in the world. We have different strengths and weaknesses. And so I'm not humanly capable of telling every individual listening right now exactly how to do that. It's just,
Right.
I'm human, right?
Yeah. Right.
I accept that. And
Yes.
so within the coaching relationship, the first thing you have to do is actually understand the other person.
Makes sense.
It's one of those things where it's so simple to miss.
Yes.
And so within those introductory sessions that you have with someone, you understand, and if you're really paying attention, you're listening not just to the words they say, but what's going on in between the words they say. You can pick up on so much that they have no clue of, because often we're in a box, and when we're inside of our own box, we can't see what's on the outside of the box.
Exactly.
That's the truth of it. And that's
Yeah.
why we need help in life.
That's why we need coaches. Yeah, we totally need coaches because
well, and not only coaches. I would say not only coaches, but I kind of group it into 5 general categories. And these are very general categories. But you have coaches who help with the future. They kind of help you guide the future of where you're headed towards. You've got more therapists or counselors or healers. There's a lot of different words for it. But they look at the past and help you overcome whatever happened in the past so that you can function in today. Not necessarily getting you to your future goals, but it's helping you overcome all those things that happened in the past.
Right.
You've got your teachers who, what they do is they give you a baseline level of knowledge so that once you have that knowledge, you can take it and make it your own. And that is a huge key when you're looking at any teacher, because there's only so much. Just like I was saying before, I'm only human. And if I'm teaching a wide audience of people, there's only so much I can give you that'll still be beneficial to a wider audience.
Right.
So the teacher gives you that baseline, which gives you enough empowerment to take it from there and build it into what's going to work best for you.
Right.
Then you have the mentors, who are people who've gone down a path that's similar to what you want to do. They've seen the ropes, they understand the different things that happen, and they can help you see those things along the path before you do. Now, the challenge with a mentor sometimes is that because they've gone down the path before now, things could change from when they did it to today, which is why coaches are also beneficial.
Yeah.
Because they look at it slightly differently.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last category is the consultant. It is somebody who's extremely, who has a major strength in an area that you do not. And you bring them in to do that job for you.
Hmm. Yeah,
All of these individuals can be extremely powerful if you bring them into your life at the right times.
absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that completely. And yes, they're super, all of them have their usefulness and purpose in different stages of their life. Definitely, that's true. So why don't you tell us just how do people work with you and how do they reach you?
So if anyone is looking to get a hold of me, the fastest, easiest way to get a hold of me is going to be going to my website, which is www.TheLeadership.Guide, Guide. There's no .com, there's no .org, there's none of that after there. It's just TheLeadership.Guide. And from there, you can find all my stuff. You can find my social accounts. You can find my podcast. You can find my TV show. You can find. Do you mind if I plug a book really quick? Because this
Oh
is
yeah, please
actually
do.
this is this is something that's recently been an honor to be able to contribute towards.
Okay, great.
So in the United States right now, there are 3,000 teens per day attempting suicide.
Mm, yeah.
And it's it's an atrocious number that we're facing right now. So many people with amazing potential snuffing it out
Mm,
daily. And this is something that is very close to my heart because there was a point in my life where I was thinking about attempting suicide.
mm,
I remember daily, I lived on the third floor of a building. I was looking out the window every single day, knowing that 3 levels below was concrete. And that if I would have went out that window with just the slightest of runs head first, it would have all been over.
mm. Yeah, it's awful,
And
right? Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, I've had dealings with suicidal people as well throughout the years of my
Yeah.
coaching. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's really serious. Oh, it's awful.
Absolutely. And not only that, but it's so prevalent.
It is. It's everywhere.
It is everywhere. And so if you're facing those thoughts right now, or you know but somebody who's facing those thoughts right now, no, I want you to know you're not alone. There are a lot of people going through this right now.
Mm,
It's a major battle we're looking to fight in the world. And in part of trying to fight in this battle, I was honored to be asked to be a contributing writer to this book. It's called Make It a Great Day. The choice is yours.
mm,
This is a compilation of multiple authors who have had that battle in themselves and who have overcome it. And we talk about that in this book.
mm,
And what's cool about this book is that whenever somebody buys this book, we give 2 books to teens so that we can start the conversation around suicide. Because one of the biggest problems is in our society, there's a huge stigma around suicide.
mhm,
And if we can break that stigma and make it okay to talk about, we can get people the help they need faster. We can prevent 3,000 lives per day attempting suicide.
mm. Yes,
And
here, here.
so, yeah.
Uh,
So on my website, TheLeadership.Guide, there's a little section in there in my services that has this book. It has an interview that I did for this book, and you can purchase the book there. I make no money from this. I don't want to make money from this. I want everything to go to people who are battling this right now because I know how hard it is because
mm,
I've been there, and it's such a challenge to wake up every day, to go through the motions of the day, to even think that a future is possible when you're going through that. And
mm,
so, if you feel so inclined, I'd be honored if people would help us in this mission, however you feel inclined to help us.
mm. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Cody, for sharing that. and it's a super important message. So, and thank you for coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, I've had a blast. And I mean, I'm sure we could have talked about so much more. And we kind of like very, very briefly touch what's all in the category of leadership and legendary leadership. But, you
Yeah,
know,
great.
maybe another time, right?
Yes, I feel like we could probably have several shows. So, yeah. So, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember that you can live the life that you want, regardless of your story. So, get out there and do it. And thanks so much for joining us today. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for listening to Love in Your Hands. Please rate, review, and subscribe to show your support. This podcast is sponsored by loveinyourhands.com, the place to find and keep long-lasting love. Start your free Soulmate Connection membership today using the most innovative and accurate algorithm to match you to potential partners, all at loveinyourhands.com.